If I'm being 100% completely, truthfully, fully, and honestly honest, the effects industry over the last 5 years has been one of the worst I've ever seen. Scratch that. The worst I've ever seen. It's not like the effects have been terrible per se, but there's no excitement to push the boundaries past what they've gone before. There's no imagination. Every step forward is like watching a CGI lion that looks boring act boring. It doesn't even look real. It looks so bad. But on a different level, and I blame Marvel for this completely, audiences don't really give a shit whether films look good or not. Not as long as their favorite character's on screen anyway. Studios have been recognizing this, and they've been taking their foot off the gas for a while. It's a shame because it's the only thing these blockbuster films are capable of doing that smaller films can't, is have good visuals. They have the money to put it all on the table and push the boundaries from what we can see in cinema. Some of these movies create new technology. I mean, we wouldn't have motion capture the way we know it unless Peter Jackson and Andy Serkis made the decision to in 2002. I see shit from 2007 that looks about as good as it does now. What a fucking disgrace. And I'll tell you, it has nothing to do with the animators themselves, and everything to do with how they're treated. So I don't have a lot of nominations this year, to say the least. There's some good stuff here, though, some stuff that deserves your attention. With that being said, here are the nominees for Achievement in Visual Effects. A Better Man. This film had a lot of pomp and circumstance, a lot of stuff going on outside the dance sequences that elevated the film to a certain extent. It kept the material engaging, and it especially enhanced the movement of Robbie Williams' internal strife. I usually prefer more practical effects, but it makes sense that they would use computer technology considering they had to work around a real monkey that whole time. That in and of itself should be considered an achievement. Alien Romulus. Speaking of practical effects, I'm a big fan of how many practical effects they used here. The aliens came off great. You know, it wasn't my favorite movie, but I thought they were romantic with how they treated the original films. They also created their own invention, one of my favorite monsters from any of these movies, and one I hope they move towards more in the future. My only issue is that one of the scenes felt like a deepfake, and it took me out of the film, the way those deepfakes always do. Beetlejuice. Hot take. Well, I don't know how hot of a take it is, but I thought the set design in Beetlejuice was not very good, actually. It was just a rehash of those old original sets. The only new thing they did was kind of lame and just didn't sit right with me. The effects, though, I thought they did a lot of cool things between those ghouls. They were inventive and funny, they utilized old school technology, and they added something to the original mystique. Dune Part 2. You will believe a man can ride a worm. That should have been the tagline. I'd watch that movie even faster if that was the tagline. But yeah, this movie's the perfect example of how you're supposed to use visual effects. They weren't just well used, they were cohesive and they had a larger vision in mind. When you see an image from Dune, you'll know just from the design what movie it came from. Villeneuve's always been good with that kind of thing. Hundreds of Beavers. This film is a perfect example of how to handle visual storytelling on a small budget, and how that can even elevate the film that you're trying to produce. It's not that this movie has great work for its size, it's that it has great work, period. Because they were so strapped, this film was forced to be more original, more quirky, and to lean into its goofiness. Like Dune, it had its own sense of style and its own coherent vision. It's just a lovely looking film. So yeah, the lineup this year is pretty much shite. I look back at films 10 years ago and at least they were trying to push technology. Now it's just blah. I'll say this is one of the easiest categories to do this year, with one clear standout and one clear second place. You can probably guess them by the way I phrased my nominations. Congratulations, Dune Part 2. You are the winner of this year's Golden Turtle Prize. In all seriousness, that worm riding scene from Dune 2 is one of the greatest achievements in cinema to ever exist. It was purely fantastic. Special shout out to Hundreds of Beavers for its visual prowess. It must have taken so much work to pull something off like that. It'll get a silver turtle. But that's gonna do it for me. I'm just wondering, how often have you been around dunes? Do you like dunes? Do you like sand? Have you seen sand separate from a beach? Did you have a sandbox growing up? I had a sandbox for like a couple years there, and I quite enjoyed it until eventually the sandbox gets dirty, and then there's a bunch of bugs inside, and then you get scared of the sandbox, and you're like, well, I don't want to go in that sandbox anymore because I saw a beetle in there one time, and that scared the living hell out of me. And then you ignore the sandbox, but when you ignore it, it only gets worse. And so now you're just stuck with like this creepy ass box, and you just keep it closed. You're like, I'm never gonna touch this sandbox ever again. And every time you open it, it's like a earth-shattering, fearful event that I had to grab my sisters. I was like, I need backup. I'm about to open the sandbox, and they were like, oh yeah, okay. Yeah, we're right there with you. Actually, they would be like 5 feet away from me. But then I'd open the sandbox, and then there'd be like a dead squirrel in there or a bird, and I'd be like, "Oh my god, that's terrifying! That's terrifying. That's not good." And so yeah, so this special shout out to if you if you had a sandbox, just like me, because I'm sure you know exactly what I mean by that. Um, I don't know. I don't know where to go from there. If you make sand and you put it together, maybe you make a sandcastle. No, no, no. I'm done talking. This is stupid. Goodbye.